Doing a proposal,
introduction,
you can ask,
why CSS matters to
will
governance.
this site be accessible to screen
Good
readers?
day, everyone.
Are we following international
Welcome to
web
lesson
standards?
317 in our web
Is the
development
information
fundamental
organized
series.
with clear headings and sections?
Today's topic is CSS.
You can also
short for
legislate or
cascading
recommend
style sheets. That all
At
public
first
sites
glance,
use
this
accessible
may
HTML.
sound highly technical,
Perhaps
government
better suited for
communications be
designers or
designed for
developers.
all citizens, not
But
just
by
the
the end of
tech-savvy.
today's session, I hope
This is
you'll
where
see
digital
clearly why
literacy meets
understanding
leadership.
CSS is critical for
To
you
wrap
as a
up,
policymaker or public leader.
HTML is more than a technical
Government
tool.
websites are often the first,
It's a tool for
and
equity,
sometimes the only,
inclusion,
point of
and
contact between
transparency.
citizens and their government.
It structures your digital
When
voice.
a parent looks for school enrollment
It shapes
details,
how citizens
when an elderly
receive your
resident
message.
searches for subsidy information,
It determines
or when
whether
a
the
small
public
business
can
owner
access the
applies
help
for a
and
local
services
grant.
you offer.
Their experience of
You
governance
don't need
begins
to
on a
write
web
HTML.
And here's
But
the
knowing
key
how
point:
it works
if that
empowers
web
you
page
to
is
lead
poorly
with clarity,
designed,
to
hard
hold
to
vendors
read,
accountable,
or confusing
and to
to
ensure
navigate,
your digital
it erodes
communications
public
are
trust.
open to all.
People expect
In
the
our
same
next
clarity
lesson,
and
we'll look at how
functionality from
websites are
government
styled,
sites as they do
how
from
colours,
their bank,
layouts,
airline,
and fonts
or
come
online
together
grocery
through
something
something
called CSS.
If a private company can
Thank
make
you
its
for your
information
time,
accessible,
and for committing to
government
becoming a
should do
digitally
even
fluent
better.
public leader. That's where CSS comes in. It is the tool that determines how your digital content looks and feels. In today's lesson, we'll explore how CSS contributes to clarity, credibility, inclusivity, and branding, all of which are essential to 21st century governance. 2. What is CSS? Let's start with the basics. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. In simple terms, CSS controls how web content appears, its layout, colors, fonts, spacing, and responsiveness. Think of HTML as the skeleton of a web page. It defines what content exists: the title, the paragraph, the button. CSS is the skin, the clothes, the tone. It defines how that content is styled and presented. This separation of structure HTML from style CSS allows for flexibility, scalability, and efficiency. You can update the look of an entire website by changing one CSS file without touching the content itself. This is especially important in responsive design, which ensures that your website looks good and functions well on desktops, tablets, and smartphones. With most people accessing government services from mobile devices, CSS plays a key role in maintaining equal access across devices. As policymakers, you don't need to write CSS, but you do need to understand its impact. Because when style goes wrong, when a notice is unreadable, or a button isn't visible, service delivery is compromised. 3. Basic CSS concepts. Let me briefly explain how CSS works, conceptually, not technically. CSS uses three main building blocks. Selectors: these tell the browser which parts of the web page to style, for example, all headings or only this button. Properties: these describe what aspect you want to change, such as the color, the font size, or the spacing. Values: these define the actual choice, like red, bold, or 20 pixels. So a CSS rule might say, for all paragraphs, use black text, in a size that is readable for older users, with enough spacing between lines. Understanding this helps you recognize how much power CSS has over the readability and usability of your digital platforms. It also means that, as an elected official or policymaker, you can better assess whether a contractor or in-house team is delivering a site that meets the needs of your constituents. 4. Core design features and their impact. Let's now turn to the design features controlled by CSS that directly affect public service accessibility. First, fonts. CSS allows us to choose readable fonts and appropriate sizes. A 12-pixel font may be legible to a 25-year-old using a laptop, but nearly invisible to a 70-year-old using a phone. A government website must be legible to all. Second, colors. Brand identity matters. A province or municipality often has a logo and color scheme. But beyond branding, color affects usability. For example, light gray text on a white background is practically unreadable. CSS ensures strong color contrast, particularly for visually impaired users. Third, spacing and layout. White space isn't wasted space, it's essential for clarity. CSS manages margins, line height, and alignment. Well-spaced content feels professional and approachable. Crammed content signals bureaucracy, confusion, or indifference. Fourth, buttons and calls to action. If the Submit button on an application form is hard to see, people will abandon the process. CSS ensures important elements stand out clearly, especially on mobile devices. Together, these features determine whether your website is accessible, professional, and trustworthy. 5. Practical example. Let's bring this to life with a practical scenario. Suppose your city or ministry publishes a webpage titled "Apply for Emergency Housing Assistance." In version 1, the text is all the same size. The paragraphs are long, the button to apply is gray, and the entire page uses default styling. There's no visual hierarchy, no headings, and no color to guide the reader. Now consider version 2. The heading "Emergency Housing Assistance" is in bold navy blue. Subheadings organize the page into eligibility, steps, and deadlines. Key information is highlighted in a yellow box. The Apply Now button is large, red, and centered at the bottom. Same content, very different experience. Version 2 is faster to read, easier to understand, and shows that the government has invested care in its communication. Citizens are more likely to follow through and trust the process. And here's the kicker, this improvement isn't expensive. It's not a whole new system. It's smart use of CSS. 6. CSS and digital inclusion. Now let's talk about perhaps the most important policy dimension of CSS, digital equity. Design is a public rights issue. Here's why. Accessibility for the visually impaired depends on CSS choices. If your color contrast is too low, or your font too small, people with visual challenges may not be able to access your services. This is a human rights concern. Font clarity matters for people with dyslexia or cognitive impairments. Using certain font families, adequate line spacing, and a predictable layout helps everyone, especially those most at risk of exclusion. Mobile responsiveness is non-negotiable. Many low-income users or rural residents only have mobile access. CSS enables websites to adjust automatically to small screens, making sure that service access isn't tied to having a desktop computer. Multilingual design is also CSS-enabled. When switching between scripts, such as Arabic, Chinese, or ISI Zulu, the style sheet ensures that the layout remains consistent, respectful, and readable. As policymakers, you should view CSS not as a technical add-on, but as a tool for justice, inclusion, and equal access. 7. Mini exercise. Let's do a quick mental exercise. Picture a basic public service alert. Water rationing begins this week. In the first version, it's written in small black